So the first person who signed in under public comment is Allison Sullivan. Thanks. Thanks for waiting. Appreciate your patience. Hopefully that was interesting stuff.
Okay. Hello again, Allison Sullivan, Blauvelt, New York. I'm here again to state my concerns about the noxious odor emitted by Aluf Plastics. First, I want to thank Tom Divany for his letter of support to the ZBA concerning this issue. Also, thank you to Jerry Patari for attending the meeting and listening to all the many residents who spoke. The noxious odor from Aluf Plastics needs to stop immediately. I'm here because I want a thorough investigation of their facility by the highest authority to ensure that this will no longer occur. I would also like a list of the toxins generated by Aluf and fully disclose them to the public. I want to be sure they are checked regularly to ensure the safety of the surrounding areas. Aluf Plastics came to 2 Glenshaw Street in Orangeburg in 1986 after a fire in their Edison, New Jersey plant. They started as a 100,000 square foot facility with 8 extruders. Today they have grown to 500,000 square feet and 70 extruders. Aluf employs more than 300 people in New York. Annual sales exceed 100 million, says President and CEO of Aluf. The operation runs 6 days a week, 24 hours a day. They process high and low density polyethylene to make garbage bags and packaging film. The town supervisor, who was taken on a tour of the facility, told us that in one side of the plant, they process rejected plastic materials to make their own plastic pellets and resins. On the other side, they process new polyethylene plastic resins. The fact that they take in rejected plastic materials and melt them down at high temperatures to make pellets is very concerning to me. How is the rejected plastic material regulated and approved? What is in it? Could there be dyes or other potentially toxic materials? When heated, do they emit more toxins? Is Aluf doing everything they can do to ensure the safety of the surrounding areas? This is an important question because after the ZBA meeting last week, it was clear that Aluf's representative and their attorney, Donald Brenner, don't really know what is going on, and their only concern seems to be the production for profit and not stopping it at any cost. I want a clear explanation of how the process of making plastic bags and films works and what they do inside those buildings. I want it posted on the town website. I want to better understand what is happening so there's no reason to have to guess. The fact that they don't have experts ready to go at their disposal to help solve issues with emissions, leaks, and regulations is a joke. Don't we find this irresponsible? We already know that they are in violation of certain town codes on odors. I have another question on the town code, though. In Chapter 43 zoning, Article 4, additional use regulations, 4.4, prohibited uses, I'm not going to read the whole thing, just what pertains to Aluf. The uses which are listed in this section are prohibited in the town. 4.41, manufacturing uses involving primary production of the following products from raw materials, and in that list is plastic materials and synthetic resins. I just want an explanation of what this means and how it applies to Aluf. I'm wrapping up.
Okay, thanks.
From what I understand, they use raw plastic materials or pellets to make plastic products or plastic bags and films. Could you clarify how this does or does not apply to them? I hope we can take this situation and learn that we need to be more careful when allowing manufacturers to come to Orangetown. We need to ask more questions when they want to expand. There needs to be someone looking out for the residents as well. There's clearly a problem with Aluf, and it has a history. They've had years to solve their issues with leaks and odors, but they have not. Until we hold them accountable, they will continue to deny there is an issue. Thank you.
Thanks. If you could submit those, if you have write-in or email, it's really helpful to have those questions as guidance.
Do you want
Thank you. Yes, please. If you, that's great. Tanya Whittick.
Good evening. My name
Welcome.
is Tanya Witek, and I live in Tapan. I really wanted to come tonight because I wanted to thank Councilman Divany for the letter which he submitted to the ZBA to be read at the meeting last week for Aluf's performance standard review. I believe it helped to set an appropriate tone for the meeting. And I would also like to thank Councilman Botari for attending. In addition, I'd like to thank Mr. Divany for his proposal tonight of a new position in the building department. And just as a point of reference, the title, I believe the title of Greg Price's position with the County Department of Health was Public Health Engineer. So if that's something you're interested in considering. I will now read an excerpt of a letter sent today to the South Orangetown School Board by our grassroots group, Clean Air for Orangetown, to update them on the situation with Aluf. It contains detailed information about the DEC compliance hearing, as well as the ZBA meeting, which other members are going to go into detail tonight. So I'll skip that part, but I will read from later in the letter, a segment in which we describe the odors which continued to assault our neighborhood last week. On 9/20, the night before the compliance hearing with the DEC, the odor was reported by a parent running on the track at Tappan Zee High School. She had to cut her run short due to the choking odor. The odor remained strong for many hours that night. At 9:30 p.m., a DEC representative documented the odor and confirmed that it was definitely emitted from Aluf plastics. More parents confirmed and reported the odor as strong in the area until at least 11 p.m. that night, but we do not know when it actually ended for sure. And this was on the field that the students were running on the next morning. The odor was strong throughout the entire week. Ironically, as the ZBA meeting was taking place at Greenbush Auditorium, the perfumed chemical odor of Aluf enveloped the entire area around the Greenbush complex, as one of the speakers during the public comment pointed out. The odor is not constant, but often lasts for several hours once it starts. On Friday morning, 9:23, residents began to report the odor by 6:20 a.m., and parents complained the odor was very strong during morning drop-off at Cottage Lane Elementary School. Children were exposed to these emissions on Friday morning for a prolonged time while waiting for their buses and being transported to school. On Wednesday evening, 9:21, the ZBA chairman asked Aluf's attorney to explain the odor. He was unable to answer, at which point Chairman Sullivan demanded how the attorney could say it was not hazardous in that case. In closing, this odor is an irritant which is commonly described as choking. It induces headaches, nausea, and sore throats. It is not healthy for our South Orangetown students to be exposed to these emissions on a regular basis, and especially when this plant is operating with known leaks. Please watch the footage from the meeting so that you can see the proceedings for yourself. The complete footage is divided into 3 segments. You will witness the chief engineer from Aluf describe the use of duct tape to fix leaks. Clean Air from Orangetown urges the South Orangetown School Board members to pursue every means possible to stop the noxious odors from Aluf immediately. Bullying is addressed seriously in the school district, and this is a case where our children are being bullied by a huge factory and to ineffective regulators. Thank you for your attention to this important matter, which is affecting our school district. Regards, Clean Air for Orangetown.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well said. Heather Hurley?
Heather Hurley, Pearl River. First, I just wanted to also thank Councilman Batari for attending the ZBA meeting last week, and thank you to Councilman Divney for the letter that was submitted. I just wanted on the record tonight just to let you know that since the meeting was not moved to Town Hall, that people were denied access to getting into Greenbush Auditorium, and that decision was made by your zoning board chairman. So just so you know, people turned around and could not park in the parking lot, and they left. In addition to the toilets backing up, and the sound system being so poor that people weren't able to hear whatever garbled responses that were coming from Aluf's representatives. I just wanted to also mention a conversation I had with a Dominican college student last week. She lives on the first floor of Hertel Hall. Last week on a beautiful late summer day, you could smell the noxious odors from the back of that dorm, which faces the back of Aluf. She told me that and every window in that dorm was open, trying to get some quote-unquote fresh air. This particular student told me that they smell the burning plastic smell all the time, but didn't know where it was coming from, and that they all talk about how disgusting it is. These are students. Somebody's child, who is one of the closest recipients to be unknowingly subjected to these disgusting emissions coming into their window from Aluf. How would the board feel and the zoning board members feel if that were their child in college? Their child who's continuously breathing in God knows what in a town where they have little to no info on where it's coming from, what it is, and how to report it. And so while the zoning board chairman sat in the meeting and didn't seem to understand why Aluf was before them, why didn't the building director fill him in to let him know that Aluf never filled out the proper paperwork, nor received proper approval for a process which has been cited 3 times since May for violating New York State air pollution control law? So Aluf never received the proper approval for new extruders and new bag lines, and they didn't receive approval on September 21st last week either. They're in violation of New York State air pollution control law since May 2016, yet are still allowed to operate without receiving, to this day, the proper approval. This is unacceptable. It's ridiculous. And regarding an email that I sent to the town board and others in Rockland County on September 22nd, I would like a response from someone here tonight to explain why Aluf still has an open application with the town from 2012 to install necessary carbon filters and elevate their stacks to mitigate the odors and what's being emitted. There was no building permit granted according to the open application, and contractor information and an insurance certificate were missing despite a note requesting both of those. So my question in the email was if someone could please ask Mr. Brenner to provide all the documents proving that this mitigation equipment was actually installed. Have these documents been provided? Thank you.
Thank you. I was just writing that down. But any submission of comments is welcome so that we can follow up. Amy Wertheim?
Amy Wertheim, Pearl River, New York. Good evening, council members and those in the audience as well as at home. It's important that anyone who is interested has an opportunity to be here or watch from home. That was not afforded to the community at last week's ZBA meeting. Even after asking for a change of venue well in advance, it was refused by Chairman Sullivan. I want to publicly acknowledge and thank Councilman Divany for stepping up and submitting a letter to the ZBA with regard to Aluf. He listened to the community's concerns and weighed in appropriately. Also, a thanks to Jerry Batari for coming. He was able to see and hear what all of us did. At this ZBA meeting under oath, Aluf's attorney, Donald Brenner, stated that he had no idea what noxious fumes were emanating from their stacks, but he knows they were not hazardous. He said that they were proven to be safe, just didn't mention that it was numerous years ago. Thankfully, Chairman Sullivan asked him how he could possibly say that if he didn't know what the smell was. The chairman also stated that he had no idea why they were there, as this was a compliance standard application and all he could see were violations. 3 since May of this year. He was told by Mr. Brenner that the application before them was a cumulative installation application that Mr. Giardello told them to fill out. Frankly, we're all confused. Aluf is violating town codes, and they came before the ZBA to ask for 7 more extruders. But wait, those extruders were already installed. They just never filled the proper paperwork. It was a puzzle to us all. After more than 30 people spoke, we were told that Aluf now has 90 days to figure out their noxious odor, per the DEC. Mr. Brenner said it will take a lot of time to find the right professional to assist in this. Shouldn't they have already had this professional? The complaints began several years ago. It's time to enact the town code and put this to rest. Shut down the operations, fix the problem, and then let Aluf get back to production. The board does have the right to do this under town code's nuisance laws. I would like you to remember the porn house nuisance. That was rectified in about 3 weeks. We implore you to take action just as swiftly as you did to fix that situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam Adino? Still here?
Dear Supervisor Stewart and town board members, my name is Sam Adino, and I'm a lifelong resident of Orangeburg and a proud product of the South Orangetown School District. Throughout my school years, we were taught about environmental awareness and the footprints we as humans leave on the earth. We learn about Earth Day, saving the planet, and how to be responsible citizens. I am certain that our school children still learn these principles today. Unfortunately, the environment of our town is being compromised by the smell in our air from Aluf plastics. This goes against everything we are taught. We have programs like Keep Rockland Beautiful and Adopt a Road. but nothing is being done to keep the air we breathe clean. We can't put dirty air in a bag and leave it on the side of the road for pickup. The air is everywhere, and we need to take better care of it for our children. Additionally, the smell is a nuisance. If I were making loud noise at 10 p.m. at night, my neighbors might call the police and report me as being a nuisance. To them, I'd be in violation of our town code. My being a nuisance would have a squad car out and address the issue immediately. Aluf's constant burning of plastic and odors it emits from its factory is a nuisance, to say the least, and there seems to be a far less sense of urgency in which this matter is being handled. Make no mistake about it, this matter is urgent. It requires action, and I ask the town board to continue to be proactive in working to find solutions to this odorous problem in Orangetown. Please let's make Orangetown breathable and beautiful again.
Thanks for your comment. The next person who wanted to speak is Kate Johnson.
Good evening. Kate Johnson, Blauvelt. My family and I moved here about 13 years ago for a better way of life. When I first got married, we lived in the city, and I rode the stinky subways. So we moved to Ossining, and then we had the threat of Indian Point and carrying the PK2 tablets. So we moved here for the clean air and the open space. And we're so happy when the bike trail opened, because we didn't have to go across to the Bronx River Parkway on Bike Sunday. So, you know, we've been waiting for the path to open. We walk our dog, we jog, and we make use of the area. But there's a stank. Through Facebook, we learned about the movement Clean Air for Orangetown. And to put it simply, it was suggested that if you smell something, say something. This call to action is vital because Orangetown air is being contaminated right under our very noses. Our quality of life is now compromised by noxious fumes. Shame on Aluf. They must be held accountable. Corrective measures must be taken now to address the violations for which they've been cited. Let's show that our town, Orangetown, cares. Together, we can make our air better.
Thank you. Going to the other side of the room, Watson Morgan.
Good evening, Watson Morgan, Blauvelt, New York. Although I don't live next to Aluf, I have availed myself to use the bike path and walking path. It's great, it's well used. I'd hate to see it not being used because people are just getting sick. I worked in an industry for 30 years that had potentially obnoxious odors, and I don't think we were cited. We may have been cited, but I don't think so. We took it upon ourselves in conjunction with the town, the state, DEC, to put HEPA and charcoal filters on the building that were connected to every single fume hood in our building. And it was very expensive and had meters, graphs that did 24-hour codification
Right.
on the thing with pressures and electronic digital stuff. And it cost us money. And then we also had to pay the town fees for what we put out in the sewer, what we put out in the air. We had to pay. It doesn't seem as though Aluf has to pay anything, and that's sad. I mean, of course, nobody wants to pay any more fees or taxes, whether it's a fee or a tax. But we had to pay these things, and they had to write out a check based on the emissions that we had, and anything. I mean, it came up that people were upset that the town is paying for $25,000 or so for metering or checking of the emissions of Aluf. they should be paying that. We shouldn't, as taxpayers, be paying that. I know, because I was part of the safety officer in our company for over 30 years, and I was part of monitoring this stuff. I was part of effects of chemicals within our plant, and I would think that they should be monitoring plants, because if the smells are going outside, there are smells inside, and it's obnoxious that they're saying that they would take care of their duct work with duct tape. I mean, that's a very, very temporary, and under the pressures and stuff that they would be using, absolutely inefficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Who I got? Right behind Amy Wertheim. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Maria Jose Romero. I'm a resident of Blauvelt. I want to speak about, I want to address two issues. The first one is we really need to monitor the air quality in our town. We as citizens have a right to know what kinds of things go out into the air that we're breathing, and Aluf has not been willing to disclose what they are spewing in the air. This monitoring needs to adhere to the highest standards of scientific rigor. It needs to be based on repeated measures controlling for meteorological factors which will affect how fumes spread throughout the community. That is, the reading needs to take place during varying conditions of temperature, previous precipitation, barometric pressure, wind speed, and direction. This monitoring also needs to be based on random blend readings of air quality. In other words, it cannot be a monitoring that is telling the offender when they're going to be showing up to check the air quality so that they shut their plant. It is a type of monitoring that needs to assure the community that under all and any circumstances, the air does not pose any risk to human life and is not a nuisance that compromises the quality of life. The second point that I want to talk about is the very negative impact that air quality has on the health, particularly among very vulnerable populations. There's ample research evidence on the association between poor air quality and asthma among children. In fact, air quality is the strongest predictor of asthma crisis in the pediatric population, as well as of visits to the emergency room. Of equal importance, air quality is the strongest predictor of chronic school absenteeism via its association with asthma crisis in children. This is a topic that I know personally. I have a PhD in the social sciences. I conducted extensive research on chronic school absenteeism in the past decade, and in fact, my research was the basis for the formulation on New York State policy on educational neglect. And particularly one of the things that I found, and findings that have been replicated by colleagues, is that asthma is the single most important predictor of chronic school absenteeism. We know from other research that the effect of poor quality doesn't stop right there. Economists talk about the concept of externalities, the externalities of chronic school absenteeism, that a child is chronically absent from school, that is misses 10% or more of the school year, has an impact on the students who are attending class, because when they show up, teachers are required to repeat and recap, and they have lost any sense of the school routine. In closing, I urge the town board to do everything possible to protect the best interest of the community. This is fundamentally a residential community, and we cannot see our health and quality of life compromised because of the carelessness of a manufacturing company. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Armanacchio, please.
Again, I'm Elena Maniaco, Blauvelt. I do want to add my voice to the notion of transparency. I mean, television's at Greenbush Road, 16 years since I've gotten involved. I think by now we should be able to put that electronic equipment there. It's not really overall that expensive. We really do need to have open discussions about changes to our parks. I think it's really important that public input is never shunned, never turned away from, and transparency is always of the utmost. But I have to say, I felt compelled to speak after I heard some of the comments about the ZBA. Because 16 years ago, when I got involved, you're invited. It's like, welcome, please come, share your comments. But then if your comments are against the project, you go to the end of the agenda. In my case, we didn't get to speak until after 12. We were there until about 2:30 in the morning. Many of our elderly residents left. I can't believe that the ZBA is still making decisions that don't only invite the public, but then actually support and accommodate their comments. For them not to have changed the venue is appalling to me. After being involved for this long, I mean, I actually wrote a letter 16 years ago and was like, how is that possible that, you know, you come to speak, but if you don't agree, you get punished by putting it, to me, I don't understand that. I really also want to speak to the word accountability. Your ZBA is a quasi-board under you. So, you know, we need to hold them accountable when something like this happens. We need to hold Aluf accountable. We need to hold the code enforcer, who maybe Mr. Divney wants to hire a new one or thinks that's a good idea, and maybe it is, but there's got to be somebody now whose job it is to enforce those codes. Why is he or she not doing that job? Or how can this town board support it so that they can do that job better? When you allow the ZBA to be cavalier, your corporations to be delinquent, your code enforcers to be so overwhelmed that they can't do their jobs on something as serious as something that could come back to you in litigation for noxious, you know, fumes. It's surprising to me. Even tonight, in my view, you have changed a law to make it easier for an applicant who would otherwise have had to be accountable for very serious hardships, to prove their hardships. So instead of holding that applicant accountable, you changed the law. I think accountability should always come first, and I really hope that you guys would really take all of what I've said into consideration. I've been around maybe not as long as everyone, but long enough to be really disappointed that so many of the same comments are coming back. That's what I have to say.
We are listening. We are listening. But first of all, just to cover a couple of topics that have been raised, and I'm sure the other town board members can help fill in as well. But on Aluf, you know, of course that meeting should have been in town hall. And it is a sad fact that the chairs of the planning and zoning haven't moved meetings when I think they should have and made that harder. We're lucky now. We're going to be moving the planning board over, and I think that there is a spirit of cooperation to get more access for the public to the zoning board meeting, whether that means ultimately coming here or investing in a technology and the volunteer hours. And there's a volunteer filming this meeting right now, and it is a big commitment. And so one of the things we need to do if we're going to film down at Greenbush is have a system in place that really does require cooperation on a number of different fronts. And I thank the individuals who do the filming themselves, put it on YouTube or whatever, but we should have those meetings just filmed. I agree with that, and I've pushed for that, and we've upgraded this system and put stuff on YouTube, which means you don't have to catch it on TV. You can always go back and look, and I think that is a help for our town residents. A lot has been done on Aluf, and a lot remains to be done. And I'll say this, I know Mr. Brenner's in the back row right now, and we've talked about this before. We need the independent engineering study. The DEC had Aluf commission. The basic theory is that will provide recommendations on how to plug the odor leaks. How else can we move forward? but by having those engineering recommendations. And I don't know what it takes to get that report done and shared, but that's something that absolutely has to happen. And all the monitoring around the edges is it may have a role to play, but the most important thing is to find the leaks and plug them. And for that, we need an independent study, and we need to see the company investing the money where it's needed. So I just want to say that one thing, and there are other things that need to be said as well, but I think that's important.
I did get down to that meeting, and the room is creaky at best, the wood floors, it's difficult to hear. The sound system is absolutely horrible. If the secretary there asked somebody to repeat something once, it had to be 25, 30 times. So, you know, it's a matter of time to when we can move things up here. I think that's a good idea. The parking was terrible. I borrowed some spot across the street from the fire department. Whether it was legal or not, I'm not worried about it at this point. But this is just, it's a better venue all around, in my belief. You know, there's some things that have to be worked out, and I'm sure they will. So that going there. On Aluf, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I just got an email saying that George Swigert collected the canisters, and in a week we should have some results. Did anybody else get that email? Or? I didn't see that from DEC. No. Okay, I'll check it again, but I believe that's what I read. That's it.
As far as the ZBA, Aluf, and what's going on, we have the diffusion tubes and the soil probes that are going to go in sooner rather than later. The reason we picked diffusion tubes is because they give us a great baseline, and they're around the perimeter of the facility. But we really can't put this on the fence line until we get permission from Aluf, and I would hope that since Don Brenner's here, he can get us written authorization to put these tubes around the facility so that we can enter into a contract with the media to do it. So, but diffusion tubes are going to be used because they give us a baseline and they can measure parts per billion, and that's the reason we went with them. As far as the ZBA meeting, you know, and what's been going on in Aluf and the town board and the enforcement, I mean, we've had John, you know, just for an explanation, John's filed a complaint. It's before the town justice, so we've gone that route where the town has and is prosecuting Aluf for their nuisance claims. The zoning board, you know, I watched the meeting on TV, is not happy with the applicant, and, you know, you might have differences of whether the meeting should be moved, but I don't think the zoning board was too happy, and I actually thought from my viewing of the meeting they were disgusted with the applicant because, you know, they came for a performance standard hearing and they hadn't complied with what the DEC wanted, so it was just a waste of time, basically, for everyone that went down there. And as far as the town board, I put my position out there. If, and a lot of it has to do with the extruders, whether they do have a permit. And I'd like to get John G. up here to discuss that because there are some accusations being leveled against Aluf about adding extruders and not having permits, and if that's the case, I'd like to know. John, you mind coming up here?
Yeah, I agree.
I had code enforcement go out, actually, probably a day after the hearing, and he went out with the fire inspector. It's my understanding there was no new extruders put in.
Okay. Is there any open permits or permits that need to be closed?
I'll have to review the file. I know there was an application that Ms. Hurley had shown me when I was leaving the office one day, but I'm not sure what that application was for, or whether there was another application that superseded that application.
Okay. All right, thank you, John. That's the only question I have. You know, we're pursuing, again, we're pursuing them in court. They're being brought in front of the ZBA. And, you know, John's gonna look into the file to see if there is a permit that supersedes it. I take it seriously. I think the rest of the board takes it seriously. My daughter has asthma. She has eczema. Today, we had to give her Benadryl because she had a breakout. You know, she's on a nebulizer every other night. So, you know, the air quality definitely affects her, especially during the changing of the season. So it is a serious issue. And, you know, I think, you know, the town and its components will get Aloof to, you know, live up to the responsibilities of a resident of this town.
I think, as Mike said, and I've been saying for a little while, we do have money in our budget, and there's no reason we don't have cameras down at Greenbush. We have a lot more money in our budget than it cost us to put them here in Town Hall, and we can make that sound system much better than it is for a reasonable cost. And I agree with Jerry, we should consider moving the ZBA up here also. But we have the planning board coming up. We're going to make sure that that all works and goes into place. And if it does, I don't have a problem with moving the ZBA up here also. I think we need to take baby steps, and we're doing that. As far as Aloof, again, you know, it sounds like nobody's doing anything. And that's not really the case. We're doing what we can within the confines of the law. We're all very concerned about it. The code enforcement officers have been out there, and while they are inundated, they have been out there several times. They did write nuisance complaints for the smells. Aloof has been taken to court, but you have to build up a court record to stand in front of a gate and tell 300 employees you can't come to work today without having a legal standing, I think would put the town in big jeopardy. So we're building a case, and we're working on it. It may not be as fast as everybody likes. We'll force them to do what they need to do to make it right. If they don't give us permission to put the canisters on the inside of their fence, then we'll put them on the outside of the fence, on our side of the property. If we don't get an answer within a month, I think we proceed without their permission and just put them right outside their fence. I don't think a few feet here or there is going to make a difference on the testing that we're going to find out. And it's not just, I mean, the most important thing, obviously, is if the air quality's safe. But it's not just the air quality, it's the nuisance of the smells. This, although it's, you know, I hear a lot of times these complaints go back 20 years. Aloof's been here a long time. To me, the complaint started when I first started hearing about them, which was from Ms. Sullivan, which was about a year ago. And since that time, we have been working on getting a remedy. So we are working on it, and I wish it could move faster myself.
If they don't allow the canisters on their property, that would show very bad faith on their part.
That would absolutely show very bad faith on their part, and it would probably help us in our case if they don't allow us, because it would seem like they were hiding something. So we'll still go ahead with the testing, whether they allow it or not. If you have questions, again, that you need an answer to, you can send me an email and tell me that you want an answer from me. Because if you're sending me, you know, if you smell it, tell it, email, I'm not going to answer it because I get a lot of them a day. I do note them. I'm keeping track of how many they are. I'm trying to see if there's a pinpoint time myself, not scientifically. Just, you know, if I see it when I'm coming to work or going home from work or running around on an estimate and I see that email, I try to verify myself whether the smells are there or not. So do keep sending the emails. It does help with the case. And the DEC, from what I think, Jerry, I did see something from that guy, George, that they collected the canisters, and we should be getting an answer. So I don't know who that email went to, but I think I seen the same one that Jerry's seen also.
There was a list that was going through a couple of different meetings, as I checked each one.
But I am very concerned about it for several reasons. First, for every resident in this community. Second, for me and my family and my grandkids. And this is my area, and this is where I live, and this is where I spend my life. So, okay. That's it for me.
Thank you for those comments. I guess I can't quite resist. Mr. Brenner, if you're willing, could you just tell us the status of that engineering report with the recommendations about how to plug the odor leaks? Because it seems like we're circling around and around that. And if a company's got odors and they got to fix them and they get in an engineering study to tell them where the leaks are, we all need to see that study and be able to measure their improvement based on whether they're meeting those recommendations. So what's taking so long with the study?
Please understand, I don't have the authority. I'm speaking here primarily as a resident of the town, too, okay? There are certain procedures you have to go through. A lot of statements were made here tonight which are not true. I don't want to get into an argument. They're not true. The company is doing what they has to do. They've met with the DEC. They're laying out a program. They're also going to follow the requirements that the town wants. Something did come up tonight. If you can help me, you say you want to put canisters. Will you please tell me what kind of canisters you want to put and what you're going to do? I will bring it to the company, and I'm pretty sure, I think they're going to let you do it, but I just don't know what you want to do. So please let me know.
I will get you that information.
Okay, I'd appreciate if you do that, and I'll try to get the company to work with you.
And are they
But
gonna
they
pay-
are working on
Will
it.
they pay for it?
Pardon me?
Will they pay the money for it?
I've made the presentation to them, I have asked them, okay?
All right.
They haven't given me an answer, but please understand, they have retained engineers. Strange as it may seem, it's difficult to get certain answers because they have to make the measurements, they have to make the test procedures. An engineer was retained as far back as May, and we're still waiting for the results because every time he comes through with a test about pressure, it's what's coming through these machines, et cetera, et cetera. It's not that they're not working on it, they just haven't got the results to give yet. But please understand, certain remarks were made. Tests were made on the effluent that came out of this process. It was made, the DEC approved it, the DEC gave them a permit. And the permit that they gave them said there was not hazardous material coming out of that plant. Everybody's ranting and raving. There is no documentation to support that. When the tests come back, if they're wrong, take my word for it, they will correct it. If they're not wrong, please don't create a panic until there is now, because there may not be one. As for the nuisance, that they're trying to resolve right now, maybe making bigger filters and things of that sort. They are working on it. It just takes time. It's not an easy thing to do.
Do you have any idea when the engineering recommendations?
They have a mandatory program laid out with the DEC. They must do something within a certain period of time. I'm trying to accelerate that to make it even faster. But they do have a mandatory program with the DEC.
Now, it's 30 days to come up with a plan, and then what, another 60
Then they
days?
have 60 days to implement the plan, and then their permit's going to change to make sure it's implemented in accordance with what the DEC wants. They are working on it. It's not where they're not.
So when is the plan due?
Like 30 days?
30 days from like
30
last
days,
Tuesday.
the operation, I would say a plan is due within 90 days, approximately from last week.
Well, you
So it's 80
said
days
it was
from today.
30 days to
It's
get to the
83
plan.
30
from
days to
today.
give them a
83 days from today. It's 90 days altogether.
Right. That was the agreement. Now, will they try to do something more rapidly? I think they will, but I'm just telling you that's the requirement to the DEC, and they're the ones that control the permit.
Is the plan on what to fix a public document?
Yes, they want,
And it's due in less than 30 days?
It's due in 23 days.
Okay.
it's 83 days.
Well, 83 days is when the fixes are
The
due.
plan's
The
due-
plan
No,
is due
no,
in 30 days.
83 days when they tell them what you have to do, and then they must implement. And they're going to change the permit so that you must implement.
Okay.
All right? And
All right, thank
they
you.
are working on it. It's not that they are working on it.
Thank you.